Ever wondered why the world's largest religions are also the richest? Do you feel like there's something they aren't telling you about the connection between power and money? The Vatican is living proof that this connection is deeper than we think. Its art is worth trillions, its vaults hold billions, but the story of how it all came to be is a well-kept secret. In this video, we'll tear back the curtain and dive into a history of strategy, business, and power. Because to understand today's financial world, we must first uncover the story of the greatest financial empire of all time. The Vatican, the wealthiest and most influential religious institution in the world. The paintings that adorn its halls, the basilicas that touch the sky, the priceless treasures, all could rival the assets of entire nations. Its bank quietly moves billions, and its influence extends from the towers of Wall Street to the most humble villages on the planet. But there's something most people don't stop to consider. This empire of wealth wasn't a gift from the heavens. It was built, and like every great fortune in history, its foundations were laid not just with faith, but with money, power, and deals that many would find shocking. This isn't a video about theology, it's a video about economics. Because the story of the Vatican's wealth is the story of how a spiritual movement became a financial empire, and how money, in fact, became the oxygen of religion. And it all begins the moment Christianity went from being a persecuted faith to a legal one, from the birth of the church to an empire of land. In the year 313 AD, the Roman Emperor Constantine issued the Edict of Milan. This historic document legalized Christianity, ending centuries of persecution. Overnight, what was a small underground faith became a state-supported religion, and with legitimacy came donations. Aristocrats gave land, emperors granted privileges and treasures. Constantine himself funded the construction of the first St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. The message was clear: wealth and sanctity could walk hand in hand. And from then on, the church learned a lesson every empire already knew. Money is power, and power needs money. In the early Middle Ages, the church had its first great financial innovation, the tithe. The faithful were required to donate 10% of their income to the church. It was a constant flow of revenue that came from peasants' fields, passed through parishes, reached bishops, and finally arrived in Rome. Many of us today live with the reality of giving up a portion of our earnings, whether through taxes or other contributions. But we rarely stop to think about where this practice originated. For the medieval farmer, who already struggled to feed their family, giving up a tenth of their crops or livestock wasn't a choice. It was a requirement to avoid risking the salvation of their soul. It was a form of collection that combined religious authority with economic necessity. This wasn't charity. It was taxation, sanctified by religion. And over the centuries, these tithes turned the church into the largest landowner in Europe. By the year 1000, it's estimated that the Catholic Church owned almost a third of all the land in Western Europe. Not just cathedrals and monasteries, but farms, vineyards, mills, forests, real assets producing real wealth long before banks or stocks existed. The great abbeys and monasteries, far from being just centers of prayer, functioned as true economic hubs. They controlled agricultural production, manufactured goods, and became major creditors to nobles and even kings. This vast network of property and economic influence guaranteed unprecedented power. The church didn't just preach about the kingdom of heaven, it dominated the kingdom of earth, the prophet of salvation and the shadows of power. But land and tithes weren't enough for the growing machine. In the 11th century, the church discovered another financial weapon: indulgences. The idea was simple and the marketing brilliant. Pay the church and you can reduce the punishment for your sins or even the sins of your deceased relatives. It was salvation for sale, and it was absurdly profitable. Indulgences poured gold into the Vatican's coffers, funding not just churches, but also wars. Because at that time, the church wasn't just a religious institution, it was a geopolitical powerhouse. The Crusades, launched in 1096, are remembered as holy wars, but they were also a major financial enterprise. Armies needed money, and the church imposed new taxes to fund them. For knights who couldn't fight, all they had to do was pay for indulgences. When cities were conquered, treasures were seized and lands were claimed for the faith, but also for the papacy. At the end of the Crusades, the Vatican had not only spiritual authority, but also a military and financial power that rivaled that of kings. And this is where the irony deepens. While priests preached poverty and humility, the Vatican was becoming Europe's largest landowner and tax collector. Ordinary families heard sermons about the dangers of greed, while the church accumulated wealth on a scale no monarch could match. It's a pattern we see in all empires, the moral story told to the public and the hidden financial machinery behind it. By the Renaissance, the Vatican was no longer just a landowner, but a powerhouse of money and politics. Popes were no longer just shepherds of souls, they were princes, lords, and bankers. And like all rulers, they needed money, not just to help the poor, but to finance armies, sponsor artists, and outshine rival monarchs. The symbol of this ambition was the new St. Peter's Basilica. To pay for this grandeur, the Vatican intensified the sale of indulgences. Preachers traveled throughout Europe, promising reduced time in purgatory in exchange for money. The marketing was aggressive, and one phrase became famous: as soon as the coin in the coffer rings, the soul from purgatory springs. The pains of the past, the lessons of the present. This is exactly where we connect with today's reality. Many of you wonder, how can an institution that preaches faith also be linked to financial scandals and accusations of corruption? How did money become more important than the spiritual message? This is one of the biggest frustrations you share, and the answer is in the history. The wealth was built on the desperation of the poor. Ordinary people, terrified by the fate of their loved ones, handed over their coins, convinced they were buying salvation. But indulgences didn't just fund churches. They also funded lifestyles. Renaissance popes lived like kings. Behind the scenes, the papacy had adopted a new tool of power, the banking system. The church, which officially condemned lending money at interest, partnered with great Italian banking families, like the Medici, to move and multiply its wealth. But every bubble bursts, and this one exploded in 1517, when a German monk named Martin Luther denounced indulgences as a scam. He argued that salvation could not be bought, that the church had turned faith into a market, and that Rome's wealth was built on the anguish of the poor. Luther wasn't just attacking the money. He was attacking the very concept that faith could be transacted. His famous thesis of justification by faith, or sola fide, destroyed the Vatican's business model. If salvation came from the grace of God and the individual's faith, what was the church, with its certificates and intermediaries, really selling? His protest triggered the Reformation, which divided Europe. Suddenly, indulgences, the Vatican's golden goose, became a symbol of corruption. The irony couldn't be more profound. The very scheme that funded Catholicism's crown jewel also triggered the revolt that destroyed its monopoly. The wealth had generated glory, but it also generated resentment, and resentment is the one currency no empire can control. The fall and modern financial ascent. By 1600, the Vatican still had immense wealth, but the Reformation had permanently damaged its aura. In the 19th century, the territorial empire collapsed for good. In 1870, the Papal States, the vast territories in central Italy, were seized by the newly unified Italian nation. The Pope, lost his lands, his rents, and his armies. The Vatican ceased to be a territorial empire and became a spiritual one. Many thought its financial power was over. But history shows us that institutions built on money don't give it up easily. The turnaround came in 1929 with one of the most important agreements of the 20th century, the Lateran Treaty. Benito Mussolini, seeking the Pope's support for his fascist regime, signed a pact with the Vatican. The agreement granted the Church sovereignty over Vatican City, but more importantly, it gave it a huge financial compensation for the lost lands, billions of dollars in today's money. It was a bailout for Europe's oldest institution, paid for by a dictator who needed its blessing. With that money, the Vatican built a new financial machine, the Institute for the Works of Religion, better known as the Vatican Bank. It became an obscure financial power, operating in secret, free from much of the supervision. The Vatican Bank got caught up in controversies such as the Banco Ambrosiano scandal in the 1980s, where billions disappeared and its chairman was found dead. Rumors linked the bank to mafia networks and money laundering schemes. This leads us to a second major frustration for many of you, the feeling that there's something secret or hidden behind the church and other major institutions. You wonder if it's possible to trust any organization that preaches one thing and seems to practice another. History shows us that the Vatican's wealth, like that of many empires, is protected by layers of secrecy. In today's world, this manifests in complex financial systems, shell companies, and a language that only insiders understand. But there is a way to navigate this. The solution isn't just to blame the past, but to use this knowledge to protect yourself in the present. The key is education. Understand the principles of how power and money move, rather than being limited to a single story. The essential lesson: faith on the surface, money underneath. Today, the Vatican's exact wealth is a mystery. Its art collections are priceless. Its properties and investments remain vast, though obscured by layers of institutions. The final lesson is this: the Vatican's wealth didn't fall from the sky. It was engineered, collected, and defended with the same tools that all empires have used: taxes, land acquisition, indulgences, treaties, and banks. It grew by selling salvation, taxing the faithful, making deals with kings and dictators, and manipulating money flows, just as modern governments and corporations do today. This story isn't about faith, it's about the machinery of power. And that's why it matters to us today, because the Vatican isn't unique. Every system that tells you to trust its promises, while quietly enriching itself, is playing the same game. Do you feel frustrated by corruption, by the feeling that something is being hidden from you? Understand this: that feeling is valid and comes from an intuition that history confirms. So how can we protect ourselves? The path to resolution, the solution to the frustrations you've expressed, lies in financial literacy and critical awareness. Understand the power dynamic. Instead of feeling helpless in the face of corruption, study how great empires and corporations accumulate wealth. Corruption isn't a bug, it's often a feature. By understanding the rules of the game, you can protect yourself. Separate the message from the messenger. You can have faith in an ideal, but be critical of the institution that represents it. It's possible to admire the architecture and art of the Vatican without agreeing with its financial history. Your spirituality doesn't need to be held hostage by an organization. Don't trust easy promises. The history of tithes and indulgences is a warning. There is no magic formula for financial or spiritual success. Be suspicious of any system that promises guaranteed gains or quick salvation. Take control of your financial journey. Instead of entrusting your faith and money to an institution, learn to be the captain of your own ship. Study investments, understand your budget, and build your own security and prosperity step by step with discipline. Ask who really profits. Before engaging in any system or buying any financial product, ask yourself, who profits from this? If the answer is unclear or isn't you, reconsider. History doesn't repeat itself, but if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. If this new perspective resonated with you, click subscribe and turn on notifications. History has the answers, and I'll show you where to look. This video is not investment advice. All content is for educational purposes. Remember, there are no promises of easy gains. The journey to prosperity depends on study, discipline, and patience.